Garibaldi aircraft carrier, a bastion of European security tasked with tackling refugee smugglers and training the Libyan Coast Guard. Here, flanked by Naples' volcanic coastline, the leaders of Europe's three largest economies discuss the existential crisis now facing the EU. Britain's vote to leave the bloc has sent shockwaves across the continent. It's now down to Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi, Germany's Angela Merkel and the French President Francois Hollande to keep Europe intact.
Whilst we respect Great Britain's decision, we of course want to reassure the other 27 countries that they can count on a safe and prosperous Europe.
We live in a historic moment. Can we dispense with Europe or not? The answer is clear. We need Europe, but a Europe that protects and reinforces national economies. We need a Europe that projects its power abroad to fight the many challenges we face, such as war raging at our borders and terrorism.
Earlier, the leaders visited the island of Ventotene and laid a wreath at the grave of Italian intellectual Altiero Spinelli. The island once held a prison camp where Spinelli, one of the founding fathers of European unity, was incarcerated during Mussolini's fascist regime. This whole meeting is steeped in history and political symbolism. But even before Britain's shock decision to leave the European Union, the bloc was facing some of its biggest challenges ever. The biggest migration of people across the continent since the Second World War, youth unemployment in its southern states, especially here in Italy, and the aftershocks of the Greek debt crisis. If ever there was a need for a rallying cry for Europe, then now is the time. There's also deep concern in Brussels about Brexit contagion. Several nations, France, Hungary, Austria and others, have all seen a surge in support for Eurosceptic parties.
Populists think that Europe is the cause of all wrongs. Bankruptcy, it's Europe's fault. Recession, it's Europe's fault. Immigration, it's Europe's fault. Economic woes, it's all Europe's fault. That is not how it is.
The EU now plans to offer incentives to African governments to help reduce the flow of economic migrants to Europe, but the EU's divided on how to pay for it. Failure could be dangerous for the French and German leaders. Both face elections next year. Italy's also facing a moment of reckoning with a referendum on constitutional reform in October. If it doesn't go Matteo Renzi's way, his centre-left government could collapse. Keeping Europe together requires not just a steady political hand, but a belief among ordinary voters that the EU is worth saving. Neave, Al Jazeera, off the island of Ventotene, southern Italy.